Hey guys, my name is xOctoManx and this is part 5 of my Quest system tutorial. In this part we are going to create the Quest User Interface Manager and we will populate the User Interface Manager, which is our latest created game object in here, with all that information, and we will fill in everything and we will see if we can read active quests and set the information directly into our quest panel. We might not go into the quest log panel for the moment, maybe we do later on. Basically it's doing the same as the quest panel do, so we go over and make this one disabled for the moment. Also later on we will hide and show panels that depending on the states, but this is not what we are going to start with. We start to fill in some data within our Quest User Interface Manager script. So what we want to do at first is this is going to be a static game object, so we need to make this one static and of course not destroyable. So this is going to be a persistent game object, and we want to make sure that we don't do that. So we create first a public static Quest User Interface Manager or Quest User UI Manager. So it's going to be the same as the class name. This is going to be the same, and we need to create an instance of that. So we just call this one UI Manager, for example. Manager. So this instance is going to be our connection later on to that script, so we don't need to search the whole screen for the User Interface Manager game object and search this stuff and that class directly on that. We don't need to get component and all the other things, so it's just we need just to say Quest UI Manager .UI Manager, and then we have access to every public variables inside. Also we can later on do some weird stuff with that, depending on how we want to fill in the data. So let's create some public and some private variables. There will be several of them. This particular part can be done different, so we might go over and change this one later on, but for the sake of competition and for the possibilities I want to show you, we go through everything I want to do in here. So at first we have some bools. I'm gonna comment this out. Those bools are basically to check if a quest is available, a quest is running, if a panel is active, and if the quest log panel is active. So the first two are going to be bools, public bools of course. So the first one is going to be called quest available, and we set this one automatically or at start to false, or it's just going to be false. The another one is going to be public too. So this is going to be a quest running, so an active quest in this case. It's going to be false too. I will explain what we're using those bools for later on. Then we'll create a private one, which is of course a bool 2, and this is going to be our panel active, as I said. So the panel active means the quest panel is going to be active when we're talking to an NPC. This is also going to be false at the very beginning. And nope, another private one. A private bool quest log panel. So for our panels itself, we need to create some game objects for the panels. So this is going to be public, since we need to drag them into our user interface manager. So this is public of type game object and just called quest panel. And we have another public one also of type game object is going to be our quest log panel. Okay, so we rename this one in here. Quest log active maybe, and this maybe quest panel active, I don't know, or this can be quest log panel active. It doesn't really matter, name it whatever you need, so we don't have any double names in here. So those are the panels we need to drag in, so we can later on make them active or inactive. Then we have a type of game object. We might not go over and use that, but again, for sake of competition, we just use that. Oops. This is going to be our quest object. So we can catch any particular quest object and take that and pass this one over, or read the data and drag this inside of that. So it's of course of type quest object, and this can be our current quest object. So we pass in or read out data from our currently talked NPC and store that in that quest object. So we have access to all the currently available and currently running for the quests from that particular NPC. So the next one is we need some quest lists. Those quest lists are two different ones, of course. The first one is the available quest list, and the next one is the active quest list, but only for that particular NPC. And this is going to be, I'm not sure if I need this one to be public. I don't know. Maybe we go over and make them. Oh, we cannot use lists because. Oh, let me go over and zoom in a bit for you. We can't use lists, so we need to make sure that we are using Unity Engine. No, not Unity Engine. We need to take system.collections.generic, so we have access to lists. We can also create some, so a public list. And the name, or actually the type of that list, is going to be of type quest. Now we need a name, so it's going to be available quest. I believe we don't need to make that quests lists public. I believe we go over and make them private later on. Except we need to go into them from outside. So we create a new list of type quest and the line, and we do the same. I'm gonna copy the whole line. I'm too lazy today to write everything again. And instead of available quest, it's going to be active quest. I can also take this and rename this to running quest. Okay, so again, maybe we go over later on and make them private, and I believe we don't need them to be public, just to check if everything works. Then we have several buttons we want to populate our quest manager with, or our quest user interface manager with. And the first one is going to be also a public one of type game object. And this is going to be our, let me just call this one Q button. So Q button is going to be just for quests. And we will also have a quest log button later on. So since we want to check in our quest log, which quests are currently running, available, and so on and so forth. And we can click on them, read the data from QuestManager, and then show that in the quest log. So those are the two first buttons. Then we will create a private list of buttons, which are basically game objects. This list is going to be to manipulate and later on delete all the buttons when we are reopening everything. So, and I call this one Q buttons with an S over here in the very end. So, and this is going to be a new list of type game object, and close the line. And also we have 3 private ones. We need to find them at the very beginning because, well, I go over that later on. So this is a private game object, and this is going to be at first our accept button we were creating in the last part. Then we have the private game object, the give up button, and of course we have the complete button. So private game object complete button, like this. And we need some spacer game objects. We have already created those spacers in the last video, so now we take them and use them for our needs. So we have the possibility to drag in that spacers and instantiate game objects like the buttons into that spacer game object and make them parent of that spacer. So we will make use of the vertical layout group, for example, or whatever it is, and depending on how you created this. All our spacer game objects are of type transform, so the Q button spacer is going to be the spacer. We can comment this one out, the spacer for Q button. And also another one, which is also of type transform, of course. And this is going to be our Q button spacer 2. So this is for Q button available. So the available space in the very top. Then we have Q button spacer 2. Let me just name this one 1. And this is going to be for our running Q buttons. And then the last one is going to be for our quest log button spaces for the active ones or for the runnings too. So public, again of type transform, and it's going to be called Q log spacer or Q log button spacer. So the Q log button later on will be a bit different, and we will create a new script for that quest log button later on. So running in Q log. Okay. So we have now the spacers, and now we need all the informations for our description panel or for our description text, basically. And to use text elements, we of course need to make sure that we are going to using Unity Engine .ui for user interface, and now we can pass over stuff into text elements. So let me just say that all infos in here, and those are going to be public too, so it's going to be public text. And now we have our quest title, we have our quest description, and of course we have our quest summary. Maybe later on we will go over and also implement rewards, depending on how you want to use that. So, but for now we keep that rewards extra, and maybe want to implement that stuff later on. So this is going to be the quest summary. Okay, and we have the same infos for our quest log. So this is going to be our quest infos. Gonna copy that over, paste. This is going to be our quest log infos, and this is going to be just called quest log title, quest log description, and quest log summary. Okay, so now let's make this game object persistent, as I said at the very beginning. So in awake, so void awake, which is a Unity function you may know already. We want to make sure that this particular user interface manager is not duplicated in every scene, but we keep them and make this particular game object persistent. And we later on, of course, need to populate all important scenes with at least one Unity user interface manager. So what we should want to check is if the UI manager is going to be nothing or null. Then we want to make sure that UI manager is going to be this. So we set this one to this. And if it's not the case, so else if UI manager is not this, so UI manager is not equal to this, then we want to destroy the game object, or basically that game object. So destroy game object. And after we are clearing off that and destroying the game object, we want to make sure that we say don't destroy on load, which is a Unity implemented function, and in that brackets we say this particular game object. So we pass this game object over that. Okay, so now in the very beginning we need to find the quest panel, the quest log panel, and we want to hide all our panel directly in the awake, but we want to take care of that a bit later on. Okay, we don't need start, so we can delete that. We just need update later on for inputs. So, and what kind of input do we need is, at first, we want to check if the user is going to press a button. So, if input dot get key down. So, if the user is going to pressing one of any codes or key codes, so I take key code dot q for quest. So if the user is going to pressing the Q button later on, and this game object is going to be in the scene, don't forget to save often, then I want to switch the active state for the quest panel active in here. So what we say is quest panel active is going to be equal to not quest panel active. What we do with that easy line, where is it? There we go. So what we do is, if this is going to be true, then it's not going to be true. If this is going to be not true, then it's going to be true. So this is an easy bool switch we can use and just switch its current state. So we don't need any if else, if else, if else. We just say set this one to whatever it is not currently, and vice versa. Okay. And of course we want to show the log, the log panel or quest log panel when we are pressing that Q button. So this is the only thing. This is the only thing we want to do when we are pressing the Q button, and we want to switch quest panel active or inactive. What we have is it's private, so we don't see that in the inspector. So if you want to check this one later on, make sure that it's active or actually public, and you can see what it's going to do. But we don't need to, since we don't want to change that by anything else but that key code button Q. Okay, so now let's create some functions. Yeah, let's maybe start with the quest object itself. So I will go over and comment everything out as best as I can. So this is going to be called from the quest object. Again, remember the quest object is the object which is an NPC character, for example. And the NPC character is going to request all that infos, like how can, or basically he is requesting, do I have an active quest, and give that or pass that over back to to that user interface manager and show the correct panel, for example, or say no, I don't have anything. So yeah, that's what we're doing. So at first we call or create this function. It's going to be public. It's of type void since we don't return anything, and we call this one check quests. And in square brackets, we pass over the quest object. The quest object again is in the NPC character or whatever, and with small letters we say just quest object. Okay, so we need to pass this info into that, and what we want to set is our current quest object, which is private. It's going to be equal to the passed over one, which is just the quest object in the very top in here. So this is going to be the same. So we have all the information, the current information inside the current quest object when we are calling that particular function. The next one is we want to ask the quest manager. So QuestManager dot QuestManager, we want to ask him, or basically request a quest, or actually all quests. So QuestManager.QuestManager.Quest request, we want to send a request to the quest manager, and what we pass over is, of course, the quest object. We could also pass over the current quest object. Basically, it doesn't matter. Don't forget to end the line. So what we get back is something whatever we want to get over when we are calling that function. We need to go into the quest manager in just a second and change some stuff inside. So if we are so when we get this one in return, our quest panel, our quest available or quest running bools, which are basically changing at that particular point, will be set to be true or false. depending on the stuff which is inside the quest manager. So before we can access it, of course, we need to create the function first. So if the quest is running, so if quest running is going to be true, or like two pipes, this is an or statement, or I don't know how this is called, or quest available is going to be true. And what we also want to check, and I will have a small typo in just a second, and if the panel is active. So if panel, no, I renamed that, quest panel active. So if this is not active, I need another pair of brackets around all of that. That's a typo I meant. So if any of that cases, so this quest panel is not going to be active, but a quest is running or a quest is going to be available, what do we want to do is at that point we want to show, I'm gonna comment this out at the very first, we want to show the quest log panel. I believe it is the right one. Yeah. We need to create that function later on. And if it's not the case, we want to fire a small debug line like debug.log, and in brackets we say no quest available. At that point, you can also pass over anything available. You can show any message over the head, make any stuff active or inactive directly over the NPC character, something like, hey, how is the weather today? Or, I don't know, you can decide what you want to do at that point. I just give back a debug log and don't show anything for the particular moment, but you can later on do anything. Okay, so to get this running, the quest running and the quest available one, so we have some stats or states we can work with and show our quest log panel later on, we need to go to our quest manager or script, and we need to change the quest request in just a bit for a bit. We need to take care of that our testing stuff in here needs to be disabled, but we set some of the variables in the user interface manager or game object or actually script. So we set quest running or quest available to be true or false depending on what the state directly in here is. I hope you understand that, and we will do that now. Okay, so what we do at first in our quest manager script, we comment out accept quest and complete quest directly in here in our quest request, since we just used that for testing if we can actually accept quests or not. Also, since we already commented this one out in here, we want to access the quest UI manager and make some notes. Or basically just set the quest running and quest acceptable to be active or not. So when we have, let's see, an available quest in here in our progress and the IDs are going to match with whatever we have, with the quest IDs we were just passing over from the quest object, because we did that by sending that quest object into the quest manager itself. And what we need to do is we send back some info to the quest user interface manager. So what we do is we say quest user interface manager, quest UI manager dot UI manager dot quest available. So we set quest available to true, since we know, okay, when we can take and debug that part in here, we know, okay, there's something in progress and there's something active or not, whatever the progress is, and we return true because it is going to be one of that available quest IDs. Okay, so we set this one to true, but we also want to do is we want to populate the active quest list in the quest user interface manager. So quest UI manager dot UI manager dot, and now we take the available quest list and we say dot add. We add that particular quest we just took, which is going to be quest list in square brackets I. Okay. And we need to do the same for the quest running. So we can say we have some active quests in this case. Instead of saying quest available, we need to set this one to quest running. So I copy this line over, or basically I can use both. Copy that over in the second part for the active quests. We have commented this one out, or I did. Instead of .quest available, it's going to be quest running. Is going to be true. And quest, the list is not going to be the available quest list, but the quest running. No, not quest running. Active quest. The active quest list. Yeah, there we go. So we add this particular ID, whichever is currently running, in our receivable quest IDs list, of course. Then we say, okay, this is going to be one of our active ones, and we want to pass over that data into the active quest list. So the user interface manager can read that data and make use of it, because we want to use that information in when we are showing the quest log, and when we want to populate all the data or all the infos directly into that. So don't forget to save the quest manager. I believe we don't need that, but you can keep it open, doesn't really matter. And what we want to do is we want to show our quest panel, and we want to show our quest log panel depending on however the state is. And here we have the quest log panel, I believe. And in here we have, this is not going to be the quest log panel, just the quest panel, of course. So we don't confuse ourselves. So I command this out once again, and I just say show panel. So show panel, we need a public void, so another function, of course, and we should call this one show quest panel. This does not need any arguments in the brackets behind that, but what we want to say is we want to set quest panel active is going to be true. Whoops, give me a second. So we know, okay, this is going to be true. What we also want to do is we want to set quest panel, which is that game object. We want to say .setActive, and in usual normal brackets I say I want this to be the same as the quest, where is it? As the quest panel active, so the same state. So if it's true, then I want to show it. If it's not true, then I don't want to show that. You can also pass over true, it doesn't really matter. Okay, and in here later on we want to fill in the data. We're gonna create a new function for this anyway. So what we do is, if one of those quests are running or available and the panel is not active, then we want to make this one active and show the panel. So what we call in here is show quest panel. Okay, so now we have that construct or that small stuff done in here. What we want to fill in data is we want to fill in buttons in that panel depending on what the active quests are, or the current quest object, what kind of active and inactive quest this particular game object has. And we want to make, want to show them. For the quest log panel, it's going to be directly under that. So we leave I leave a space in here. So maybe we want to go over and do that one later on. Then, of course, later on we want to hide all that panels depending on the button press or depending on whatever it is. And of course, we want to clear all the text elements and all the other things by hiding all of that stuff and clear the buttons. But let's skip that for the particular moment and let's fill in the quest buttons for our quest panel. So I call this one just fill buttons for quest panel. So we create a new function. It doesn't need to be public. It's just our own function in here inside. So I call this one fill quest buttons. We don't need any arguments in here, but we will loop through all of that stuff for depending on the active ones and the available ones. So let's take at first the available ones. What we say is for each quest, so of type quest, it's going to be for me called available quest. It's just a variable which is a placeholder. And what we go over or go through is in the available quest list. Available quest list. Let's rename that. Give me a second. We need to say it's quests with an S at the very beginning, because that is a bit make sure that you use an S instead, because otherwise we would have problems later on in here. So in available quests, with which is our available quest list at the moment. So for every element in that quest list of type quest, we want to create a button. This is of type GameObject. We call this one just quest button, and we want to instantiate that button. So instantiate, and what do we want to instantiate? We want to instantiate QButton. QButton, as you may remember, is our button for all the quests, and we'll have our data inside. Also, we need a button script to. We don't have that at the moment. We need to create that in just a second too. We need to access the button script directly on that button and pass over all the informations inside that button. So let me just save the Quest User Interface Manager. Gonna go back pretty quick to Unity. And for our button, we need to create, ignore that errors in here. We will go over and fix that in just a second. We create a new C# script, and I call this one QButton script, like that. And we can also start or actually open this one up, since we need to fill in, well, not much data, but a bit. So we can read and access all that info. Oh, there's an error. Give me a second to load and reload everything in mono behavior. Mono develop, of course. So what we at first need is make use of using .unityengine.ui for the user interface, so we can pass over or use text elements. We need two functions or two public variables for this. The first one is a public of type int. It's going to be our quest ID. So every button will have its own quest ID, of course, and of course a text element for public text for our quest name. This will, or title. Let's just use title. So we pass over that data later on in that button. The button also will have a lot of functions, or that button script, so we don't need a lot of scripts. I will just do everything and from time to time, and everything will be in one script, so we can use that from any particular point, and we can also use our quest and accept buttons for that and all the other things. So everything will be, or basically everything will be in QButton script. Okay, so QuestManager, we don't need that. We need to open up the Quest User Interface Manager again. Let's scroll down a bit. So we want to fill in data in our quest button. I go over and go into my prefabs folder for our quests, and in the QButton we need to add our quest or QButton script. So I go in here and drag the QButton script directly. Oh, I cannot add that because of that. Okay. Oh, yeah, of course. In the Quest Manager, make sure that you also, since we changed the list name, make sure that it's going to be with an S behind, like active quest in here too. Gonna save the Quest User into the Quest Manager too. Can close this once again and should be fixed. It's just that S. Yeah, there we go. The warnings we can ignore at the moment. And now we drag over our QButton script directly on the on our button or QButton prefab. And we don't need to fill in any data because this will be done by our Quest user interface manager. Okay, so now we have that on the button, so we can access that from outside and pass over data. So when we are creating that button, we have that instance or the name for that, so we can instantly how shall I say, we can instantly access all the components directly after instantiating this one before we lose the connection to it. So what we do is, at first we create a new instance of QButton script. There we go. And we name this just QButton. I hope this is going to work and not be a problem with that game object. Yeah, that is not what we want. Let's call it QB script. Yeah. So this is a QuestButton script we want to access. And what we want to do is we want to go through QuestButton. We want to get the component directly on that QuestButton. And what we want as the QuestButton script or QButton script, like this, brackets, close the line. So now we have the access directly to that. What we want to set now is we want to set the QuestButton or the QB script ID or QButton script QB script, there we go, dot, and now we want to set the ID of the quest to this particular quest ID we have as our available quest ID. Yeah, and that's what we want to do. So we say the quest ID is going to be equal to our available quest, which is this one in here, dot ID. So now the button knows, okay, I have a quest ID of 1, for example, or whatever it's going to pass over. The next thing is we want to take also the title of the quest and pass it over to the button too. So QB script dot quest title is going to be equal to available quest without an S in the end dot title, I believe. We don't have quest title, we just have title. Okay. Okay, so now we have the title on it, but we also want to make sure that this instantiated button is in the correct spacer game object, or spacer transform in this case. So what we say is our quest button, which we just instantiated here again, we want to set its transform dot transform and its parent, so set parent to one particular spacer, and in this case it's going to be QButton spacer 1, which is in the top left in the available quest one. We need to drag this one over later on we do that. And what I also want to make sure is that I type in comma false, so we will stay in the local space of that and not in the world space. And the very last one is I want to add this created button to our button list. So QButton, QButtons is this one dot add, which was a list. And now what we want to add is we want to add this particular quest button. I know it's going to be maybe a bit confusing, but trust me, everything will work. We're going to copy this part over because we need to do the same for the active quests. So instead of quest available quest, we say it's going to be an active quest in our active quests list. This is going to be, everything is going to be the same here. We will instantiate a QButton. We want to pass over the data of that from the QB script and so on. But instead of available quest.id, we take active quest.id, and in here too we take active quest.title and pass that over. But instead of QButton spacer 1, we take QButton spacer 2, like this. And of course we do the same. We want to add this particular button to our quest button list. Okay, so now we can save that, and you should be able to make use of it, or actually show that. But the problem is we are not activating that because we are not talking to that and calling that show log panel button thingy. So we need to set this one up too. But let's go into the user interface manager pretty quick. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff in here and a lot of errors too. Instead of .quest title, we need to type text in the very end, because it's not of type string, it's of type text. So we need to say, instead of just quest title, it's going to be quest title.text. Don't forget to save. Let's go back and see if everything is working in here. Okay, there we go. So what we do is we can now populate this in our user interface manager with all that information. We don't need to fiddle around with all that stuff. We just need to pass over all the game objects. Okay, so this is going to be our quest panel, so we drag this one in. This is our quest log panel, so we drag this one in. Our quest button is going to be in our prefabs folder in our quests folder in here. So we drag over Q button in here. Quest log button, we don't have that at the moment, so we keep it as it is. The quest button spacer 1 is going to be in our quest available one, quest or Q button spacer 1, this one in here. So we drag the Q button spacer 1 into Q button spacer 1, of course. Same for the receivable quest, we have Q button spacer 2, so we drag this one over into Q button spacer 2. The quest log button spacer, we already have that, I believe, in our available quests thingy here. We need to rename that. Basically, it's the running quest one. It's a Q button spacer 1. We might rename this one later on too, so we don't confuse ourselves. Then we have the quest title. The quest title is in our quest description block or log or panel in here. So we have the quest name in here, so this is going to be our title. Then we have the quest description. We have the quest summary, which is this summary. We have the same all that stuff for the quest log title, log description, and log summary. So we open up a quest description and pass over the name, the description, and the summary. We don't need to fiddle around with all the other things at the moment, and also we don't need to fiddle around with the available lists and the active lists. And same for the very beginning stuff in here, like quest available and quest running, because these are going to set automatically. So the only thing we don't have at the moment, as I said, is the quest log button, but we need to take care of that later on. Now, don't forget to apply the changes to the prefab. That's pretty much important. So now it's not that bold, and everything is working as it should, and it will remember everything because it is directly in the user interface manager game object. Otherwise, we couldn't take or hold all that information, except for the button in here, because that's a prefab and there's no problem to hold that info, but other stuff is not working or wouldn't work, like anything in the scene, for example. We would lose the connection directly. Okay, so now we have that. Let's see, I don't know how far we went the last time, and maybe we can test this one out already, so we can make instantiate or actually show us some stuff. But since we are not hiding anything, it's a bit tricky. Let's see if I can go to my hero character a bit closer. I'll go into 3D mode. And let's see if I can talk to this guy. He already says, yeah, the quest one is going to be available. And what you see is it has added that quest 2 times directly into our available quest. We need to fill or actually get rid of that data later on. So we don't have any active quests, so we don't get that back. So this is basically working, but we need to show and make that buttons or make use of that buttons. And the best way is, I believe, directly in our game object, quest object. Okay, so what we do is we open up our quest object, and what we already have in here is the in-trigger test, and we press a spacebar. What we get is actually, or what we request is, we request a specific game object, or basically a specific quest. But instead of requesting the QuestManager request with this particular game object or this particular quest object, we want to use the newly created user interface function check quests. So what we do is, instead of calling the QuestManager directly, we call our quest user interface manager. So quest user interface UI manager dot quest. No, it's UI manager. And in here, what we want to do is we want to check the quests. And what we pass over is, or what we need to pass over is of type quest object. And what we can do is, we can do the same, we can just say this. So we take this particular quest object and pass us over into our quest manager object. Then everything will be copied. Then the quest manager request is going to be coming directly from that function. Then we take if the quest is running, available, and so on, and then we show the panel, which is we set this panel to be true, and we fill in data. But we only would fill in data, of course, when we call the fill quest button in here, and that's what we do at the next step. Don't forget to save the changes. Same for the quest object. Don't forget to save the changes. Now we press play. Again, I try to get this to work. When I'm close to that, can press space, I would get, again, the quest is available, but there will be also a null reference. And this null reference can come from everything at the moment. So what we want to do at first is we want to hide our quest panel at the very beginning of the game, or actually of the scene or whatever. Okay, so let's hide and close our quest panel, or actually clear off everything from our quest log panel, and that's what we are doing in the wake function. But let's do that, I don't know, somewhere. The quest log fill button, I don't know, somewhere here maybe. So hide quest panel. Oh. So we create a new public. I'm not sure if I need this to be public, but let's do that at the point, or currently. So it's of type void, since we don't since we don't return anything. So, and we call this one hide quest panel. So what do we want to do when we are hiding that panel? We want to clear off a lot, and yeah, we want to set at first the panel. Quest panel active is going to be false when we are hiding that, of course, like this. Then we say quest available is going to be false, so we reset everything at that point. The quest running is going to be false too. And now we want to clear all text fields. Oh. Whatever that was, I don't know. So we want to clear text. That means our quest title is going to be equal to nothing, so we just set it to any string. But we don't, or we cannot do a string directly on a text field, so we say quest title.text is going to be equal to, nothing inside. Then our quest description dot text is It's going to be equal to the same, nothing. Then our quest summary, summary is going to be, quest summary.text, of course, it's going to be equal to nothing too. So after we have cleared our text, we also want to clear all lists, like the available quest list, the active quest list, and the button list, the quest button list. So clear lists. So what we do is at first available quest dot clear. So we clear it, just easy as that. The next one is the active one, active quests dot clear. So also clear this one. We don't have any quests anymore in that. And of course we need to clear the button list. Clear button list. But before we do that, we want to make sure that we also delete all the buttons depending on that list. So we loop through that pretty quick with a for loop. You can also use a for each, I believe, but yeah, for loop is a bit safer, I believe, at that point. So int is I is going to be equal to 0. So while I is smaller than the Q buttons list dot count, so the length of the list, we increment I, so it goes through the whole button list. And what we want to do is we want to destroy all that buttons. So we say destroy in brackets, and in here we take quest, what is it? Q buttons in square brackets I. So we delete every item from one to another. And after we have deleted everything from our scene, basically, no matter where it is, because we have the direct connection in that list, we can say the Q buttons dot clear, so we can clear off the whole list again too. And the last one is going to be, we want to hide the panel, which is our quest panel, our usual quest panel. And this is going to be quest panel, yeah, that's a game object dot set active. And what we want to set this one active is going to be to our panel or quest panel active. So, and since we set quest panel active at the very top to false, we set this one to false too. Okay, don't forget to save the changes. And what we also want to do is we want to call hide quest panel directly in awake. So, and same will be done later on within or with our quest log panel. Yes. The only thing which might not work is that we can instantly we might not have instantly access to our quest panel and quest log panel. But I'm not sure. We want to try that. So we call, no, not hide an inspector. We want to hide our quest panel. If this is not going to work, let me clear the list in here. If this is not going to work, we need to take do some changes. So now what I do is I can go over in here and call that guy. And what you see, it automatically opens this one up. But there's again another null reference, which is going to get called in our quest user interface manager in line 141. He cannot accept or access the quest button. Let's see how we can fix that. Oh, okay, I found the solution. Yeah, that's another reference because in our Q button, we haven't actually dragged in our text field into the quest title. So we can open our asset or prefab in here, and we have our text element directly under that. So let's drag this one over directly into the opened prefab. So we don't need to apply the changes, we will do that automatically. So now everything should work, and we should see a button created. Yeah, there we go. And now we have a text element inside. We have the hello world, which is the title. Directly read it out from the user interface manager, which you can see here. There's hello world. We just copied the data directly from the QuestManager, which is, where is it? There we go. So in here we have that quest already, and so we can now basically could work with that button. We could click on that, and when we are clicking on that, we should be able to see data depending on that particular button. Also, as you can see, that button is, where is it? Where is it? We need that into the spacer 1. As you can see, there is a button clone directly in the Q button spacer 1, where it has to be. You can also scroll out and see, okay, there we go, that's our spacer, and this is our button, which is automatically inside that particular game object. And of course it's scrollable and all the other things later on if you want to implement that, but currently we just pass over some data of that and can make use of that button. So, and since 1 hour is already done, we go and complete the user interface manager in the next part, since we have to do a lot more stuff instead just filling in some data in the button. We also need to make sure that all the other buttons like accept, give up, complete is working, and we fill in all the data into name, description, summary, and so on. And of course we need to fill in the receivable quest stuff also, but this is only working when we are able to accept the quest, and then we can pass over the data into receivable quests later on. Okay, that's it for that part. See you in the next one. Bye bye. Thanks for watching the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thumb this video up if you like it, and feel free to become my patron or donate by using PayPal to support me and my channel in the future. All links will be below in the description. See you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.